Victoria Sterling sat by the huge window in her room on the 45th floor of the Sterling Tower in Manhattan. The city lights sparkled below her like diamonds scattered on black velvet. She could see everything from up here, but she could not go anywhere. Her legs had not moved for 6 long years. The accident happened when she was 16. Victoria loved horses more than anything in the world. Her father, Richard Sterling, owned the biggest tech company in America, and he bought her the most beautiful Arabian horse named Thunder. Victoria rode Thunder every day at their estate in Connecticut. She was preparing for the national championship when everything changed. That day in October was cold and windy. Victoria was practicing jumps when Thunder got scared by a loud noise. The horse jumped sideways and Victoria fell hard on her back. She heard a terrible crack sound and then everything went black. When she woke up in the hospital 3 days later, the doctors told her she would never walk again. Richard Sterling was the richest man in New York, but all his money could not fix his daughter. He hired the best doctors in the world. Victoria had 15 surgeries in 6 years. She went to hospitals in Switzerland, Germany, and Japan. Every doctor said the same thing. Her spine was badly damaged and there was no hope. Victoria lived in the penthouse apartment. That took up the whole top floor of the Sterling Tower. Her room was bigger than most people's houses. She had everything a girl could want. Designer clothes filled 3 walk-in closets. She owned hundreds of expensive handbags and shoes she would never wear. Her bathroom was made of white marble with gold fixtures. A private chef cooked whatever she wanted to eat, but Victoria was not happy. She spent most days in her wheelchair looking out the window. She watched people walking on the streets below and felt jealous of every person who could use their legs. Her friends from school stopped visiting after the first year. They did not know what to say to her. Victoria understood why they stayed away, but it still hurt. Her father worked 18 hours every day. Richard Sterling built his company from nothing, and now it was worth $50 billion. After Victoria's accident, he worked even more. He could not look at his daughter without feeling guilty. If he had not bought her that horse, she would still be walking. If he had been there that day, maybe the accident would not have happened. Richard tried to buy Victoria's happiness. He bought her a new car even though she could not drive it. He hired personal trainers to help her exercise her arms. He brought famous artists to paint her portrait. He even bought her a small island in the Caribbean, but Victoria never wanted to visit it. The doctors came to see Victoria every week. Dr. Martinez was her main doctor, and he was very kind. He told Richard that Victoria needed to accept her condition and learn to live with it. But Richard would not give up. He kept looking for new treatments and spending millions of dollars on experimental procedures. Victoria tried every treatment her father found. She took hundreds of different medicines. She did physical therapy for hours every day. She tried electrical stimulation and stem cell therapy. Nothing worked. The feeling never came back to her legs. The worst part was not the wheelchair or the pain. The worst part was watching her father blame himself. Richard Sterling was a strong man who solved every problem with money and hard work. But he could not solve this problem, and it was destroying him. Victoria's mother died when she was 12 from cancer. Richard had tried to save her too, but the disease was too strong. After losing his wife, Richard promised himself he would protect Victoria from everything. When the accident happened, he felt like he had failed again. The penthouse had everything Victoria needed. There were ramps everywhere and special equipment in every room. The elevators were fast and quiet. She had nurses and helpers available 24 hours a day. But Victoria felt like she was living in a beautiful prison. Sometimes Victoria dreamed about walking. In her dreams, she could run and dance and climb mountains. She would wake up and try to move her legs, but they never responded. The doctor said she might have some feeling come back, but after 6 years, Victoria had stopped hoping. Victoria spent her time reading books and learning languages. She could speak French, Spanish, and Italian perfectly. She studied art history and knew everything about famous paintings. She took online college classes and got perfect grades. Her mind was sharp, but her body felt dead from the waist down. Richard hired the best psychologists to help Victoria deal with her depression. They taught her breathing exercises and meditation. They told her to focus on what she could do instead of what she could not do. Victoria listened politely, but their words did not help the empty feeling in her heart. The media called Victoria America's tragic princess and took pictures of her whenever she left the building. Richard hired bodyguards to keep the photographers away, but they always found a way to get their shots. Victoria hated seeing herself in magazines looking sad and helpless. Every night Richard came to Victoria's room to say goodnight. He would sit beside her bed and they would talk about business or books or movies, but they never talked about the accident or her legs or how they both felt. There was too much pain between them and neither knew how to fix it. Victoria's bedroom had a balcony that looked over Central Park. Sometimes she would sit outside in her wheelchair and watch children playing in the park below. She remembered being their age and running around without thinking about it. Now every step those children took seemed like a miracle to her. The apartment was always quiet except for the sounds of the city far below. Victoria had stopped listening to music because happy songs made her sad and sad songs made her sadder. She preferred the silence where she could think and remember better times. Richard kept a picture on his desk of Victoria riding thunder. In the photo, she was jumping over a fence and smiling with pure joy. Sometimes Victoria caught him looking at that picture with tears in his eyes. She wanted to tell him it was not his fault, but the words never came. Victoria knew her father would never stop trying to find a cure. He had meetings with doctors and scientists every week. He funded research projects at universities around the world. He offered $1 million prizes for anyone who could help his daughter walk again. But Victoria was getting tired of hoping and being disappointed. As she sat by the window that night watching the city sleep, Victoria wondered if this was all her life would ever be. A beautiful room high above the world with everything money could buy except the one thing she wanted most: the ability to stand up and walk out the door and never look back. 3 months later, Richard Sterling decided they needed to get away from the city. He had not taken a vacation in 10 years, but the doctors said fresh air might help Victoria feel better. Richard owned a ranch in Montana that he had bought years ago but never used. The ranch was far from everything with mountains and rivers and clean air. Victoria did not want to go, but she could see how tired her father looked. Richard had dark circles under his eyes and he was losing weight from stress. Maybe a change of place would help both of them. Victoria agreed to spend 2 weeks at the ranch. The flight to Montana took 4 hours in Richard's private jet. Victoria looked out the window and saw endless fields and forests instead of tall buildings. The land looked so big and empty compared to New York. When they landed at the small airport, Victoria could smell something different in the air. It was fresh and clean without the city smells she was used to. The ranch house was made of wood and stone and looked like something from a Western movie. It had wide porches and big windows that showed the mountains in the distance. Richard had sent people ahead to install ramps and make everything ready for Victoria's wheelchair. Her room was on the first floor with doors that opened to a garden. The first few days were peaceful but boring. Victoria sat on the porch and read books while Richard made business calls. The ranch was so quiet that Victoria could hear birds singing and wind blowing through the trees. At night, the sky was full of stars that she never saw in the city. On the 4th day, dark clouds moved in from the mountains. The ranch manager told them a big storm was coming and they should stay inside. Victoria had never seen a real thunderstorm because the tall buildings in New York blocked most of the weather. She was curious to watch the storm from the porch. Richard was in his office talking to people in Tokyo when the rain started. The wind got stronger and stronger until the trees were bending like they might break. Victoria watched from the covered porch as lightning lit up the sky. The thunder was so loud it made her jump. Victoria decided to go to the garden to get a better view of the storm. The porch was covered, but the garden was open to the sky. She rolled her wheelchair down the ramp and into the garden. The rain felt good on her face after being inside for so long. The storm was more powerful than Victoria expected. The wind pushed her wheelchair and the wheels started slipping on the wet ground. Victoria tried to turn around and go back to the house, but the wheels got stuck in the mud. She pushed harder on the wheels, but the chair would not move. The rain was coming down so hard that Victoria could barely see the house. She called for help, but the thunder was too loud. Her father was still on his phone call and could not hear her. Victoria tried to use her arms to pull the wheelchair out of the mud, but she was not strong enough. Victoria started to panic. The rain was soaking through her clothes and she was getting cold. Lightning flashed very close and the thunder came right after it. She had never been alone in a storm like this, and she felt scared and helpless. Suddenly a man appeared through the rain. He was tall and had dark hair and was wearing old work clothes that were completely wet. Victoria had never seen him before, but he walked toward her like he knew exactly what to do. The man did not say anything at first. He just bent down and looked at the wheelchair wheels. Then he put his strong hands on the back of the chair and lifted it out of the mud like it weighed nothing. He started pushing Victoria toward a small house. She had not noticed before. Victoria wanted to tell him she lived in the big ranch house, but the rain was too loud. The man seemed to know where he was going, so she let him push her. They reached the small house, and he opened the door and brought her inside. The house was simple, but warm and dry. It had wooden floors and furniture that looked old but comfortable. A fire was burning in the fireplace and made everything feel cozy. The man brought Victoria a towel and asked if she was hurt. Victoria said she was fine and thanked him for helping her. She asked who he was, and he said his name was Samuel Chun. He lived in this house and worked the farm next to Richard's ranch. Samuel had seen Victoria stuck in the garden and came to help. Samuel was different from anyone Victoria had ever met. He was probably 45 years old with kind eyes and gentle hands. He did not act nervous around her like most people did. He did not ask about her wheelchair or treat her like she was fragile. He just made tea and talked to her like she was a normal person. Victoria asked Samuel about his farm, and he told her he grew organic vegetables and herbs. He had been farming for 20 years after his grandmother taught him everything she knew. His grandmother came from China and brought many old traditions with her, including how to grow plants for medicine. Samuel noticed that Victoria was shivering and brought her a warm blanket. He sat across from her and looked at her carefully. Not at her wheelchair, but at her face and the way she held her shoulders. Victoria felt like he was seeing something that other people missed. The storm was still loud outside, but Victoria felt safe in Samuel's house. She told him about living in New York and how different the ranch was from the city. Samuel listened carefully and asked good questions. He seemed genuinely interested in what she had to say. After an hour the storm started to get quieter. Samuel said he should take Victoria back to the ranch house before her father started worrying. Victoria did not want to leave yet. She felt more relaxed than she had in months. As Samuel got ready to take her home, he looked at Victoria again with those careful eyes. He asked if she had been in her wheelchair for a long time. Victoria told him about the accident 6 years ago and how the doctor said she would never walk again. Samuel nodded like he understood, but he did not say he was sorry like everyone else always did. Instead, he said something that surprised Victoria. He said his grandmother always taught him that the body has more power to heal than most people believe. Sometimes the right treatment just has not been found yet. Victoria had heard this kind of talk before from people who did not understand medicine. But something about the way Samuel said it was different. He was not trying to give her false hope or sell her something. He was just sharing what he believed. Samuel pushed Victoria back to the ranch house through the light rain. Richard was standing on the porch looking worried and angry. When he saw Victoria with a stranger, he demanded to know what happened. Victoria explained about getting stuck in the storm and how Samuel had helped her. Richard thanked Samuel, but Victoria could tell he did not trust this man. Samuel was polite and quiet and left without asking for anything. As Victoria watched him walk back to his small house, she felt like something important had just happened, but she did not know what it was. That night, Victoria could not stop thinking about Samuel and the way he had looked at her. For the first time in years, someone had seen her as more than just a girl in a wheelchair. Maybe there was more to this trip than just getting away from the city. The next morning, Victoria woke up thinking about Samuel Chun. She had dreamed about walking through his vegetable garden and picking fresh tomatoes with her own hands. When she opened her eyes and saw her wheelchair beside the bed, the dream felt cruel. But something about meeting Samuel had changed how she felt. Victoria asked her father if he could visit Samuel's farm. Richard said absolutely not. He did not know anything about this man, and he did not want Victoria going to strange places. Richard had spent 6 years protecting Victoria from people who might try to trick her or hurt her, but Victoria would not give up. She told her father she was bored and wanted to see how vegetables grew. She had never been on a real farm before, and it might be educational. Richard could see that Victoria was more interested in something than she had been in years, so he finally agreed to drive her there. Samuel's farm was small but beautiful. Rows of green plants stretched across several acres with mountains rising behind them. Samuel was working in a field when they arrived, and his clothes were dirty from the soil. Richard stayed in the car while Victoria rolled her wheelchair to meet Samuel. Samuel showed Victoria around his farm and explained what he was growing. He had carrots and lettuce and beans and many herbs that Victoria had never heard of. Samuel picked a tomato right from the plant and gave it to Victoria to taste. It was the most delicious tomato she had ever eaten. While they walked between the rows of plants, Samuel asked Victoria about her back injury. He wanted to know exactly what the doctors had told her and what treatments she had tried. Victoria was surprised by his detailed questions. Most people avoided talking about her condition, but Samuel seemed genuinely curious. Samuel told Victoria about his grandmother who had lived with him until she died 2 years ago. His grandmother was a traditional Chinese medicine doctor who had helped many people with problems the regular doctors could not fix. She taught Samuel everything she knew about herbs and acupuncture and healing energy. Victoria had heard about acupuncture before, but she thought it was just putting needles in people for no real reason. Samuel explained that Chinese medicine looked at the whole body as connected systems of energy. When the energy got blocked or unbalanced, people got sick or hurt and could not heal properly. Samuel said his grandmother always told him that Western doctors were very good at fixing broken bones and removing sick organs, but they did not understand how energy moved through the body. Sometimes what looked like permanent damage was really just blocked energy that needed to be released. Victoria found herself asking Samuel if he thought his grandmother's methods could help someone like her. Samuel was quiet for a long time before answering. He said every person was different and he could not make promises, but his grandmother had helped people with back injuries before. When Victoria and Richard returned to the ranch house that evening, Richard was not happy. He had watched Samuel talking to Victoria, and he could see that his daughter was getting interested in ideas that might give her false hope. Richard had already spent millions of dollars on treatments that did not work, and he did not want Victoria to be disappointed again. Richard called Dr. Martinez in New York and told him about Samuel Chun. Dr. Martinez said traditional Chinese medicine had no scientific proof and could be dangerous. He warned Richard that desperate people often fall for treatments that promise miracles but deliver nothing. But Victoria could not stop thinking about what Samuel had said. That night she used her computer to research Chinese medicine and acupuncture. She found studies showing that acupuncture could help with pain and that some herbs had real medical effects. The research was not perfect, but it was not complete nonsense either. The next day, Victoria asked her father if she could visit Samuel again. Richard said no and explained that he had talked to her real doctor who said Chinese medicine was not safe for someone with her injury. Richard reminded Victoria of all the times they had tried new treatments that did not work. Victoria got angry in a way she had not felt for years. She told her father that she was 22 years old and she could make her own decisions about her body. She had tried everything the regular doctors suggested and nothing had worked. What was the harm in trying something different? Richard and Victoria had their first real fight since the accident. Richard said he was trying to protect her from being hurt again. Victoria said she was already hurt and sitting around doing nothing was not helping. The argument ended with both of them feeling bad but neither changing their mind for 3 days. Victoria stayed in her room and barely spoke to her father. She felt trapped by Richard's fear and overprotection. She understood that he wanted to keep her safe. But she also felt like she was dying slowly from having no hope. On the fourth day, Victoria made a decision. She asked the ranch manager to drive her to Samuel's farm while Richard was on a business call. The ranch manager did not want to go against Richard's wishes, but Victoria convinced him that she just wanted to buy some fresh vegetables. When Victoria arrived at Samuel's farm, he could see that she was upset. They sat on his porch and Victoria told him about the fight with her father and how trapped she felt. Samuel listened without giving advice or taking sides. He just let Victoria talk until she felt better. Samuel said he understood why Richard was worried. Any father would want to protect his daughter from disappointment. But Samuel also said that sometimes the biggest risk was not taking any risk at all. Victoria had been living the same way for 6 years, and it was not making her happy. Victoria asked Samuel directly if he would be willing to try treating her with his grandmother's methods. Samuel said he would need to examine her first to see if his grandmother's techniques might help. He warned Victoria that even if the treatments worked, they would take time and patience. Samuel's examination was completely different from what doctors usually did. He did not take x-rays or blood tests. Instead, he felt along Victoria's spine with his fingers and asked her to describe exactly what she could and could not feel. He looked at her eyes and tongue and felt her pulse. After the examination, Samuel was quiet for a long time. Finally, he said that Victoria's injury was serious, but he could feel that some energy was still moving through her spine. His grandmother had taught him that where there was any energy, there was hope for healing. Samuel explained that his treatment would combine acupuncture with special herbs and gentle exercises designed to unblock energy pathways. He said the process would be slow and Victoria might not feel changes for weeks or months. He also said there was no guarantee it would work. Victoria felt something she had not felt in 6 years. She felt hope. Not the desperate hope that came with expensive new treatments, but a quiet, steady hope that maybe her body still had some power to heal itself. She asked Samuel when they could start. Samuel said they could begin the next day, but only if Victoria told her father what she was doing. He did not want to sneak around or cause problems in their family. Victoria agreed, even though she knew Richard would be furious. That evening, Victoria told her father about her decision to try Samuel's treatments. Richard was angry and scared and threatened to take her back to New York immediately. But Victoria was calm and determined. She said she was going to try this treatment with or without his permission, and she would rather have his support. Richard could see that Victoria had made up her mind and nothing he said would change it. He also realized that his daughter seemed more alive and hopeful than she had been in years. Maybe letting her try this treatment was less dangerous than watching her give up on life completely. The treatments began the next morning at Samuel's small house. Victoria arrived early, feeling nervous and excited at the same time. She had not felt this hopeful about anything in years. Samuel had prepared a quiet room with soft music and the smell of burning herbs in the air. Samuel explained everything he was going to do before he started. He would use very thin needles to stimulate specific points along Victoria's spine and legs. The needles would help unblock the energy pathways that had been damaged in her accident. He also prepared special tea made from herbs his grandmother had taught him to use. The first treatment was strange for Victoria. She could not feel the needles going into her legs, but Samuel said that was normal. He placed needles along her back and neck and arms where she could feel them. The sensation was not painful, but it felt like tiny electric sparks under her skin. Samuel worked in complete silence, concentrating on each needle placement. Victoria felt very relaxed lying on the treatment table. The herb tea made her feel warm and sleepy. After an hour, Samuel removed all the needles and helped Victoria back into her wheelchair. Victoria did not feel different after the first treatment, but Samuel said that was expected. He explained that her body needed time to remember how to use the energy pathways that had been blocked for 6 years. The healing would happen slowly, like a plant growing from a seed. Richard came to pick up Victoria after the treatment. He was still angry about her decision, but he could see that the treatment had not hurt her. Samuel spoke to Richard respectfully and explained exactly what he had done. He invited Richard to stay and watch the next treatment if it would make him feel better. Victoria returned to Samuel's house every day for the next 2 weeks. Each treatment was a little different as Samuel adjusted the needle positions and changed the herbs in the tea. Victoria began to look forward to the peaceful hours she spent lying quietly while Samuel worked. During the 3rd week, something unexpected happened. Victoria was lying on the treatment table when she felt a strange tingling sensation in her right leg. At first she thought she was imagining it, but the feeling got stronger. She told Samuel what she was experiencing, and he smiled for the first time since they had met. Samuel said the tingling was a very good sign. It meant that energy was starting to move through pathways that had been blocked since her accident. He adjusted the needles to encourage more energy flow, and Victoria felt the tingling spread to her left leg as well. Victoria was so excited she could barely contain herself. When Richard came to get her, she told him about the tingling sensation. Richard was skeptical and reminded Victoria that doctors had warned her about phantom sensations that did not mean anything real. But Victoria knew this was different. That night Victoria lay in bed, focusing on her legs and trying to feel the tingling again. It came and went like waves, but it was definitely there. She had not felt anything in her legs for 6 years, and now there were real sensations. She barely slept because she was so excited. The next morning, Victoria could not wait to get to Samuel's house. During the treatment, the tingling was stronger than before and lasted longer. Samuel said Victoria's body was responding faster than he had expected. He warned her not to get too excited too quickly because healing was not always a straight line, but Victoria could not help feeling hopeful. Every day the sensations in her legs got a little stronger. After a month of treatments, Victoria felt something that made her heart race. She was lying on the treatment table when she felt her right toe move slightly. Victoria gasped and told Samuel what had happened. Samuel remained calm, but she could see excitement in his eyes. He asked Victoria to concentrate on moving her toe again. She focused all her energy and felt the toe twitch a second time. Samuel removed the needles and helped Victoria sit up. He asked her to look down at her right foot and try to move her toes. Victoria stared at her foot and concentrated harder than she had ever concentrated on anything. Slowly, her big toe moved up and down. Victoria started crying with joy. After 6 years of no movement, she could finally control part of her body again. Samuel handed her tissues and said this was just the beginning. Victoria's energy pathways were opening and more movement would come if they continued the treatments. When Richard arrived that evening, Victoria showed him how she could move her toe. Richard stared at her foot in amazement as the toe moved up and down on command. He had seen many doctors over the years, and none of them had been able to create even this small amount of movement. Richard called Dr. Martinez in New York and described what had happened. Dr. Martinez said it was impossible and that Victoria must be having muscle spasms that she was mistaking for voluntary movement. He insisted that Richard bring Victoria back to New York for proper testing, but Victoria refused to leave Montana. She could feel her body changing every day and she did not want to interrupt the treatments. Richard was torn between his trust in modern medicine and what he was seeing with his own eyes. His daughter was definitely moving her toe on purpose. Over the next 2 weeks, Victoria's improvement accelerated. She could move all the toes on both feet and flex her ankles slightly. Samuel increased the frequency of treatments to twice per day and added gentle exercises designed to strengthen the newly awakened pathways. Victoria practiced moving her feet for hours every day. The movements were small and took enormous effort, but they were real. She felt like she was learning to use her body all over again. Every tiny movement was a victory that filled her with joy. Samuel remained careful not to promise too much. He explained that toe movement was easier to restore than leg movement and walking was still a distant goal. But he could see that Victoria's spine was healing in ways that surprised even him. His grandmother's techniques were working better than he had dared to hope. Word about Victoria's improvement began to spread among the ranch workers and neighbors. People came by Samuel's farm to see if the stories were true. Victoria did not mind showing them her toe movements because she was so proud of her progress. A local newspaper reporter heard about the story and came to interview Victoria and Samuel. The reporter was amazed to see Victoria moving her feet and wrote an article about the traditional Chinese treatments that were helping the rich man's daughter walk again. The newspaper article was picked up by larger papers and television stations. Soon reporters from New York and Los Angeles were calling Richard asking for interviews. Richard tried to keep the story quiet because he did not want Victoria to be disappointed if the treatment stopped working, but Victoria wanted people to know about what Samuel was doing. She felt that other people with spinal injuries deserved to know that there might be hope beyond what traditional medicine offered. She agreed to do one television interview to share her story. The interview aired on national television and millions of people saw Victoria moving her feet and talking about her treatments with Samuel. The response was overwhelming. Hundreds of people with similar injuries called asking for Samuel's help. Samuel was shocked by all the attention. He had never wanted to be famous, and he worried that people expected too much from him. He reminded everyone that Victoria's case was unique and that not everyone would have the same results. 3 months after beginning treatments, Victoria achieved something that amazed everyone, including Samuel. During a treatment session, she felt a strong sensation in her thigh muscles, and suddenly her right knee bent slightly. Victoria could move her leg for the first time in 6 years. Richard watched his daughter bend her knee and knew that everything had changed. The doctors who said Victoria would never walk again had been wrong. This simple farmer with his grandmother's ancient knowledge had accomplished what millions of dollars and the best medical minds could not do. 6 months after her first treatment with Samuel, Victoria stood in front of her bedroom mirror at the ranch house. She was holding on to parallel bars that Samuel had built for her and taking slow, careful steps. Her legs were weak and shaky, but they were moving. She was walking. The journey from moving her toes to taking real steps had been the hardest thing Victoria had ever done. Every day required hours of practice and painful exercises to rebuild muscles that had not worked for 6 years. Samuel guided her through each stage with endless patience and encouragement. Victoria's first assisted steps happened during her 4th month of treatment. Samuel was supporting her weight while she tried to move her legs forward. Suddenly she felt her right leg step forward on its own, followed by her left leg. She had taken 2 real steps without thinking about it. Both Victoria and Samuel cried that day. After so many months of slow progress, this breakthrough felt like a miracle. Richard arrived to find his daughter standing between parallel bars with Samuel holding her steady. Victoria looked up at her father with tears of joy streaming down her face. Richard Sterling had changed completely during the months of watching his daughter heal. The angry, skeptical man who had tried to stop the treatments was gone. In his place was a father who finally understood that his money and power could not solve every problem. Sometimes the answers came from simple people with ancient wisdom. Victoria continued to improve week by week. She graduated from parallel bars to walking with a walker and finally to taking steps with just a cane for balance. Each milestone was celebrated by Samuel, Richard, and the growing group of people who had followed Victoria's story. The media attention had become overwhelming. Television crews and newspaper reporters came to Montana every week to document Victoria's progress. The story of the millionaire's daughter learning to walk again with help from a poor farmer had captured the world's imagination. Victoria decided to use the attention for good. She announced that she wanted to help other people with spinal injuries find hope and healing. With Richard's support, she began planning a foundation that would combine traditional Chinese medicine with modern medical research. Samuel was hesitant about getting involved in anything so big in public. He preferred his quiet life on the farm and worried that too much attention would interfere with his ability to help people. But Victoria convinced him that they could help thousands of people instead of just one at a time. The Sterling Chun Integrative Healing Foundation was officially established 6 months after Victoria took her first steps. Richard provided $50 million in startup funding, while Samuel agreed to serve as the director of traditional medicine research. The foundation's first project was to document exactly how Samuel's treatments worked. Victoria wanted to prove to the medical community that traditional Chinese medicine could be effective for spinal injuries. She hired the best researchers in the world to study Samuel's methods. Dar Martinez flew to Montana to see Victoria walking with his own eyes. The doctor who had told her she would never walk again stood speechless as Victoria walked across the room without assistance. He admitted that modern medicine did not have all the answers, and agreed to join the Foundation's medical advisory board. Victoria's recovery made headlines around the world. She appeared on television shows and magazine covers sharing her story and promoting the Foundation. But she never forgot that her healing had started with one man's quiet kindness during a thunderstorm. Samuel continued to treat patients at his farm, but now he also traveled to medical schools and hospitals to teach his grandmother's techniques to doctors and therapists. He was amazed to learn that many Western doctors were eager to learn about traditional healing methods. The Foundation opened its first treatment center in Montana near Samuel's farm. The center combined traditional Chinese medicine with physical therapy, occupational therapy, and psychological counseling. Patients came from around the world seeking help that they could not find through conventional medicine. Victoria decided to return to college to finish her degree in psychology. She wanted to understand how the mind and body work together in healing. Her graduation day was planned as a public event to show other people with disabilities that anything was possible. The graduation ceremony was held at the University of Montana with hundreds of people in attendance. Victoria's classmates, professors, and family members watched as she walked across the stage without any assistance to receive her diploma. The crowd gave her a 5-minute standing ovation. In her graduation speech, Victoria talked about the importance of never giving up hope. She said that sometimes the best treatment comes from unexpected places, and the most important healing happens when doctors and patients work together. With open minds, after graduation, Victoria threw herself into running the Foundation. She traveled around the world visiting hospitals and meeting with doctors who wanted to learn about integrative healing. She also met with patients who had been told their conditions were hopeless. Samuel expanded his small farm to grow more medicinal herbs needed for the Foundation's treatments. He hired other farmers to help him and taught them his grandmother's methods for growing healing plants. The farm became a center for research into herbal medicine. Richard Sterling had found a new purpose in life. Instead of just making money with his technology company, he was now funding research that could help millions of people. He established partnerships with universities and hospitals around the world to study integrative healing methods. 2 years after Victoria's first treatment, the Foundation had helped over 1,000 patients with various conditions. Not everyone experienced the dramatic recovery that Victoria had, but many people found significant improvement in their symptoms and quality of life. Victoria met many people whose lives had been changed by the Foundation's work. There was Maria, a dancer who had been paralyzed in a car accident and learned to walk again through integrative treatments. There was James, a veteran with back injuries who found relief from chronic pain through acupuncture and herbal medicine. Samuel remained humble about his role in all these success stories. He insisted that he was just sharing knowledge that had been passed down through generations of healers. He said the real credit belonged to his grandmother and all the traditional healers who had preserved this wisdom. The Foundation established research partnerships with major medical schools to conduct scientific studies on traditional healing methods. Victoria wanted to prove that these treatments were not just folklore, but real medicine that could be measured and understood. Victoria's personal story continued to inspire people around the world. She received thousands of letters from people with disabilities who said her example had given them hope to keep fighting for their own recovery. On the 3rd anniversary of her first treatment, Victoria returned to Samuel's small house where it all began. She walked through his vegetable garden picking tomatoes just like in her dream years earlier. Samuel watched her with a quiet smile, knowing that his grandmother would have been proud. Victoria and Samuel continued to work together, building bridges between traditional and modern medicine. They proved that healing could come from combining ancient wisdom with scientific research. Most importantly, they showed that hope should never be abandoned, even when doctors say there is no cure. The Foundation grew to become one of the most respected healing centers in the world. Victoria's story proved that sometimes the most powerful medicine comes not from expensive laboratories, but from the gentle hands of someone who truly believes in the body's power to heal itself. Samuel still lived in his small house on the farm, but now he was recognized as one of the world's leading experts in traditional Chinese medicine. He never forgot that his greatest achievement was not fame or recognition, but simply helping one young woman find the strength to walk again.